Welcome to our second edition of the Virginia DC First LEGO League webinar series. Tonight we're going to be unpacking the RePLAY season. We've got some details about the challenge out. We've gathered a lot of great resources for you. So this is only part one. We'll be looking more in depth at the robot game at a later time, but tonight we will address some of the robot game issues that I've been hearing from teams. So to get started, our webinar agenda tonight, again, as I will always do, we'll do some introductions and housekeeping points. Want to go over the season really quick and give a couple more COVID-19 updates. The majority of our time we'll talk about starting your team up, team management, and then we'll take a little bit more deeper dive into looking at how core values will look during this pandemic, how innovation project can look for this season, even some ideas to get you started with robot game. This won't be a deep dive into robot game and all the missions. We'll be doing that in September. But I know some teams are itching to get started. They've got their challenge kit. They're wondering how they're going to do this in the fall. So we do want to give teams some ideas on how they're going to be able to manage the robot game and some of the different situations that we're facing. So just a quick introduction. I'm Caitlin Olnitsky. I'm the Assistant Director of Virginia DC First LEGO League. Before this, I was a middle school educator and a First LEGO League coach. So I do try to bring some of that background and knowledge to this position, and I think it definitely comes through in this webinar. Also, I have on the line with me is Christian Jones. She's our media and marketing specialist at Virginia DC First LEGO League, and she's going to be helping me moderate questions. For those of you who were on the last webinar, we are going to be bringing in some other teams and other regional experts over the next couple sessions. But just to get started, we definitely wanted to give teams more ideas for COVID. So you will be seeing some other people on the calls, but for tonight you just have Christian and I. So this session is being recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel later on, by tomorrow actually. So if you have to hop off the call or if you want to send this to another coach or educator or someone else you know, you will be able to send this. In addition to all of the slides, you will be able to access all of the links and all of the material that I present. It'll be posted on the YouTube video, and we'll actually send that out on our listserv by tomorrow. We are going to be stopping for questions. We have a couple key points throughout the presentation that will stop and take questions. Last week, we noticed that I wasn't seeing some of the questions, so I think I have that figured out. But just to make sure when you are addressing questions, you have a little send to option in the chat and the Q&A. Try to send that to all panelists, but if not, we're going to do a better job tonight of capturing all the questions because that was a lesson that we learned last time. And to respect the time of everybody, we may not be able to answer every question depending on that. Seems like we don't have too many people on the call tonight, so I'm sure we'll be able to get to everybody, but we'll always try to post questions and answers as we move forward. So tonight's session, I want to give a huge thank you to two resources. If you're not already following them, Share and Learn is an online community. They have a Facebook group. They're associated with an FRC team and some other really big websites that support FLL teams around the country. So they're a really great way to ask questions. I follow them now. I get little tips and tricks that I didn't even realize. They've been really helpful in a lot of these resources you'll see tonight. And then if you haven't checked out the FLL Tutorials website, it's a website that's maintained by the FRC team 802 or 8027. I believe their team name is These Are Not the Droids You're Looking For. But they've created a lot of amazing resources through EV3 lessons, Spike Prime lessons. But a lot of the resources you're going to see tonight have been created over the summer, and they're on flltutorials.com. So no need to reinvent the wheel, but just want to give a huge thank you to people within the FIRST community who are really just helping change the gears and get people thinking about how they can make this work, even in the middle of COVID-19. So I know I do have a couple of brand new coaches on the call who are just getting started. So I just want to remind you that First LEGO League is for students ages 9 through 14. Just contact us if you're interested in having a student who might be 8 years old or in third grade about to get there. We do make those exceptions, typically for about grades 4 through 8. They receive a team challenge, which we're going to get to look at tonight. I'm really excited. That deals with a real world problem. They'll have two parts to it, the robot game and the innovation project. Tonight we'll talk a lot more about the innovation project, give you some tips and trick on robot game, but we will do a special session in September where we just dive into robot game. you'll get to talk with our head ref, Steve Scher, and get some really great insights as to how you can make that work for your team this year. And then one of the most important guiding principles behind what we do is our core values. And especially in COVID-19, I think that our core values are going to become even more important to our community. And it's going to be a piece that some other STEM programs don't have that I think is really important with all the issues that our team members and our students and our communities are going to be facing as we enter this season. So if you haven't seen it yet, this is posted. This is the first page of the challenge guide for the RePLAY season. It looks different from past years. It almost lines up, in my opinion, like a checklist. So if you're a new coach or even a returning coach, it's a good thing to kind of look at and visualize, okay, what exactly are we doing this season? So with core values, it gives you things that you're looking at in terms of the core values and having fun, making an impact, being inclusive, working as a team, discovering more, and coming up with innovative ideas. Your team will be designing a robot. They do have lots of ideas out there and base models for you to get started, but you're going to program it to solve game missions. You're going to explain how that robot did that, meaning that the kids wrote the code. They know what they're doing. It doesn't have to be a essay or anything like that, nothing at all, but they're able to explain and talk about what they coded and how they got the robot to do that. And they're going to be able to describe their strategies. How did they complete their missions? How did they get into it? So then there's the thing that a lot of us love is the robot game. Teams will strategize their missions. They'll design attachments that they may need. They'll test and refine their programs and compete in an event. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but that is hopefully a part of the experience. And then we get to the innovation project where they'll identify a problem, design a solution, share that idea, refine it, and then present their work. So this year they've actually decided to put the challenge out in what they call like a challenge story. It's kind of like a graphic novel, almost got an anime feel to it. So they're really looking at the idea of play and the idea of physical activity in our community. And one thing that we've seen is that people are not as active as they used to be. So this challenge guide gives some teams to think about how can we make people more active in our community. And I think that COVID-19 is a really interesting this challenge is happening in an interesting time because of COVID-19, where some of us, depending on where we live, are confined to certain spaces. If we're learning at home virtually, how can we make sure we're getting those opportunities if we're working from home? So I think there's going to be a lot of great ways that teams might be able to look at problems in their real life right now and really have an impact in their community. So I'm excited about the challenge this year. Season overview, again, you'll need 2 adult coaches and 2 to 10 team members. I know that with COVID-19, some people have asked about having a team of 1, but a team of 1 isn't really a team. So you want to try to get at least 1 other person with you, but up to 10. When you register with FIRST, you will receive your official team number, your team meeting notebook, and engineering notebooks. We will talk about these physical things because we know in a virtual environment that might be tricky. You'll decide which robot works for your team, and we'll talk about that more in other sessions, but you can find some information about that on our website as well. You'll order your season materials, which is your challenge kit and the Lego robot. Again, if you're a veteran coach, you've seen all these things. The question now is, how do we do all of this during COVID? So I'm definitely going to tackle each part of these, each piece of this, and how you might be able to get some ideas for COVID. The challenge was released August 4th, so we're really excited. You can go online and look at the robot game and everything that's out there now. But it was released just a week ago, so really excited. Our COVID-19 updates are not too much different than our last webinar. We have decided to push our competition season back to January, mid-February. We're still deciding on what events will look like. We will 100% be running events in some way, shape, or form, whether they be all remote. We're still investigating the possibility of physical events with a hybrid of the two. Our biggest goal is to keep teams safe, but just please know that we really want to be able to still honor the experience of a physical event and really make it happen for our kids. We do plan to make an announcement as soon as we can. We're still talking with our venues, our tournament directors. We're still seeing to see what schools do and how they handle the school year moving forward. So just know that we're going to make this decision soon, but we just don't have it yet. But still, there's a lot of great work that can be happening right now and ways to engage your teams and your students and your kids in STEM work. So before we get started, I really wanted to talk about this quote that I got from my favorite principal. It's from a leadership strategist named Jim Collins. It's about rejecting the tyranny of or and embracing the genius of and. Whether you're a veteran coach or a rookie coach, I know in your head you're kind of thinking, well, how can we have it's FLL or be safe? It's all virtual or nothing. And so I really am encouraging you on this session to embrace the genius of and. How can we be safe and have a first LEGO League Challenge season? How can we get our kids programming and working with robots and keep our coaches and communities safe, our coaches and communities and students safe? So it's not just really about this or that. We're really looking at the and part of it. So we really want to look at how some of these ideas might be able to help you. A lot of the guidance I'm about to show you has actually been released from FIRST, and some of it is just things that I put together, as well as things from FLL tutorials. So local health and safety guidelines should always be followed first, but you will be able to follow this. What I did for this webinar is I basically took a 15-page document and I tried to break it out into more sizable chunks in a way that made more sense to people who might just be starting or trying to figure out how this is going to work for them. You can find that 15-page PDF on our website. We do have a brand new website, and I'm excited about it. It's at VA+DC FLL.org. On our homepage, on the sliding banner, you'll see this COVID-19 updates graphic. If you click on challenge, it'll take you to our COVIDs page. And that will give you access to the season guidance. So if you really want to see where I pulled a lot of these resources from, you'll be able to find them there. So definitely take a look. And a lot of the resources I'll also be talking about tonight, you're going to find on the website. So if you haven't had a chance to pop over there and check it out, we're still working on a couple pages, but I think we really designed it as a resource for you during COVID-19. So as we start talking about team management, and then we'll take a break for questions because I already see some popping up, I want you to think about where your team might fall, because most teams in Virginia and DC are going to fall into one of these categories. We have a lot of teams that come from different places. Some teams are community-based, some teams are family-based, some teams are in homeschools, after-school organizations, within schools. So we know that our teams are all over the place. So the ideas I present tonight are going to try to address one of these three categories. So teams might be able to meet, but they're going to have safety precautions put in place. So we'll talk about some of those safety precautions they might be able to use. Some teams, they may need to meet remotely, but they still might have access to a team robot or a table, whether it be through a parent's house or an organization, an after-school club, a church, whatever it may be. There still may be some possibilities there. Right now in Virginia and DC, small groups of people are still able to meet with certain safety conditions in place. So a team of 10 with a coach might still be possible. Again, it just depends on where you are located because we are such a big region. There are definitely some teams who are just going to need to meet remotely, and they cannot even get their robot right now. I know many school districts are starting virtually, and they may not be coming back until November or even January. So that does present some challenges. But I still think, again, if we're looking for that genius of and, there are still ways that you can engage teams in the work, even if it takes you a little bit longer to do that, or we have to change what it looks like. So thinking about where your team is, that might depend on what resources are going to better fit you. So the biggest thing I encourage teams to do, and if you're a teacher, you kind of understand this, is take the temperature of your team. Whether you're veteran or rookie, and when I say temperature, I don't mean the physical temperature, because I know with COVID-19, that could be something. But take the temperature of your team. What I mean by that is, how does the team feel about meeting in person? What restrictions are already being put on place at your school or your county or your city? Can the team meet remotely? Could the team meet in small groups? Could the team meet outside? I've even talked with a coach who plans on putting their FLL table in their garage, and when they're having meeting days, they drag it out so they can be in open air, still wearing masks, but a little bit safer. And it'll be kind of like soccer practice, where if it rains, no team meeting or maybe a remote meeting. So again, I'm really encouraged by the innovative ways that coaches are trying to think about how they can still deliver a season and work with their team, because they know it means a lot to them. Maybe your team could do something between a hybrid of remote or in person. Maybe your team can't meet yet, but maybe in the future. Again, there's a lot of maybes here because it's going to depend on the situation you're in. School teams, if they were to check with their administrators and see what the school is feeling like, maybe there's a parent on the team who might feel comfortable hosting. And if all the parents can, if all the team, or excuse me, parents on the team can agree to that, that might be another place to look at. Again, it really is just going to depend on having these conversations. You won't know until you try, and the worst thing you could say is no, it won't work. At least asking the question is going to be a good starting place. So if your team can meet in person, it's going to be really important to think about what norms for safety you have. What's going to be the normal thing? Is it going to masks, physical distancing, hand sanitizers, material sanitizing, living in groups? All of these things we'll talk about a little bit more. But what things are going to be really important? Again, we know that a lot of people feel differently on this. I'd say definitely follow the science and what's coming out of local and state guidelines and from the CDC. We are a community of scientific thinkers, so have those conversations within your community. If the group meets remotely, right now, before you get started, start thinking about some of these questions. What access do they have to tech? Is there a limit to it? Are students sharing devices in the home? What kind of parent support do they have? You might not be able to expect the same from parents who don't have that same tech background or don't feel as comfortable. Maybe there's ways you can help support them. Maybe there's outside support from schools or other organizations that you can find. And again, I'll give you some tips when we really get into the nitty-gritty parts of the challenge, but these are all things that you can just start to kind of jot down or start to think about. If your group might want to do a hybrid of the two, remote or in person, then consider having conversations about both. That's going to be important just to kind of figure out what those things are. When you're talking with your community, find out about what your students' interests are and what their needs are. If you're meeting remotely, it's going to be a lot harder to kind of tell how someone's feeling, how they're engaging in the program. Even if you were a new coach, I still think that these are good things to find out more about. Who is coming and working in your team every day? What are things that make them excited? What are things that make them happy? I know a team that won some big awards at state championship last year, and they were going to the world championship. They got together as a team because they just love to play Fortnite together. And they also love Lego League, but they had that common bond. So think about how you might be able to find those common bonds as well. And if you're not used to this, First has created some really helpful resources in terms of maybe taking a parent survey or just asking a few questions through an email. They've already created the work for you. It's just about you going in and finding it and saying, yep, I want to ask this question. No, I don't think that question's important to my team. But they really try to do a lot as to giving you ideas for how you can get the team even having these conversations. The biggest thing that you can do is find out what's going on with your team so you can advocate for them. In a lot of communities right now, I know that they're coming together to get more Wi-Fi access into homes, to get more devices, to get more funding to programs like this. So what resources already exist out there? If you are looking to start a team, I really encourage you to go onto our grants page. We have a couple grants available right now, one of which is only open until August 14th, and it's for the entire state of Virginia and DC. So please, if you're looking for more resources, get over there and see if there might be a grant that you can apply for. So I know we have a couple questions coming in. So before I get into some of the team management resources, I just wanted to stop and check with Christian. Christian, what questions are we getting?
So I had one that came in. They were asking where they can access the team meeting notebook and engineering notebook since they did not receive it in the kit that they got.
So from my understanding, those are actually going to be shipped separately from the kit. The kits are actually shipping a lot faster than the engineering notebooks. I ordered for a team a kit on Friday, and we received it at our office today, but we haven't received the engineering notebooks yet. So I believe they're coming afterwards. You will probably get 2 emails saying that things shipped. I'm going to guess the first email is going to be the kits because the challenge kits, which everyone's pretty excited for, they've been coming to teams closer. Again, I ordered mine on Friday and got it today, but I have not received my engineering notebooks yet. I will be talking about where you can find engineering notebooks electronically. First has put some of these resources in your team dashboard, so I will show you that later, but if you've already gotten your kit, I would assume the notebooks are coming in the mail, and if not, you can also check your shipping status in your team dashboard, and if you want to connect with us later on, we can show you that as well.
Okay. I think that's all the questions we have for now.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. There's a few more that kind of trickle in.
Yep.
Um, so one person received notebooks but only got 2 engineering notebooks, even though they have 5 team members.
So that is something that I'm going to be checking with first about. Last year, they sent 10 to every single team, and a lot of teams gave the feedback, but that wasn't needed. So they told us that they would be shipping a different amount. They never told me how many. So I'm going to take that question back to first, and I see that was from Juliet, I believe. And so I will get back to you on that because sending only 2 won't be adequate. So I'll figure out what teams can do to request more. If 2 was a mistake or if that's what they're going with, they're going to need to come up with another answer. But until then, I will show you how to access these things digitally, which won't be perfect, but I will check on that answer for you. So we'll get back to you on that one. Another question I have, somebody asked specifically to me was just, we haven't received our kit yet. And if you're looking for materials from first, I definitely would go to your team dashboard. There is a place that you are able to look to see if the updates on your tracking and your shipping. And if not, first would be the person to connect with. And in our last webinar, we do have some resources available to you there. So before I move on, Christian, are there any other questions you want to throw out there, or do we just want to go ahead and move on?
I think we're good to move on.
Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about meetings, okay? So now you've kind of talked with your community, you've figured out how you're going to try to move forward. So now I want to give you some strategies for if you're going to meet in person or remote. If you're planning on meeting in person, you definitely want to follow all health and safety guidelines. That's going to be really important. What is your team comfortable with, and what's going to work for you guys? So one thing that you can do is try student cohorts. In the team engineering notebooks, they have it set up where there's 2 different groups and they do everything. They switch back and forth. Some teams like that, but some teams don't. Nobody says that every kid has to do every part of it. I know when I was a coach, I had kids who really wanted to do the project, who really wanted to do robot game. Sometimes there was an uneven balance and we had to go back to our core values and talk about that as a team. But you could have students breaking up into smaller groups that remain the same. That way you're kind of making less contact in between groups. I know a lot of schools are doing that where they kind of have bubbles going on. The engineering notebook, again, is set up for these 2 groups, but also it could be based on task. Maybe there's a project group and a robot group. Maybe there's whatever it may be, but materials can be separate that way. So thinking about dividing students into smaller groups is a really helpful one. Another really helpful resource if you decide to meet in person is to come up with a team plan. The FRC team that I talked about has created a sample plan, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can take a look at this and decide, yep, our team wants to do this, this, and this. Create the plan, have every parent make sure they're cool with it, everybody's on board, and then follow the plan, but be willing to change it. We know that this situation is going to change. It's already changed several times. So this is an idea for some of those agreements that you can make beforehand, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Again, I don't know how many teams are going to be able to meet all the time in person this year, but there are some possibilities for that, and there are some safe ways that you can still do that. If you are still a school-based team, because there are still some areas of Virginia, I don't know about DC as much, but there are still some schools that are going to be meeting in person. So Lego has actually built an entire website for you about how to manage today's classroom with COVID-19. It gives you lots of tips and tricks about how to handle materials and different things within Lego. So definitely check that out if you're a teacher looking for more ideas about your classroom. If you're going to need to do your meeting remotely, make sure that you're involving everybody in the conversation as you get started. Keep core values in the beginning and set some new norms. I mean, maybe there was a certain way that you would meet normally, but how are you going to do that online? What's the longest amount of time that you can meet? I mean, I know some of the meetings I've sat on that are long are just too long. So maybe 40 minutes. Maybe you're going to put in breaks. Maybe you're going to have a structure. We open with this and then we move to that and then we close with this. So talking about how you collaborate remotely is still important. If anything, learning from the big work from home shift, I think a lot of businesses and companies realize we've got to have some protocols in place. And the same thing with your students. I mean, letting them know what you expect on a meeting, giving them some time to play on the meeting as well and be silly because they are kids. So build in those opportunities for them to be able to do that. remember that when you go into an online meeting, you're seeing into somebody's home. I mean, there are lots of videos right now on some of the embarrassing things that have been seen, but for some of your students, you may be seeing things that they deal with at home, your team members that you would have never known about before because you were never in their home. So just make sure that you understand too that when you're hosting from your home, that you're getting ready to bring all these kids virtually into your home. And so just think about some of those things, because we've seen some of the awkward things that come up in our new day and age. So just things to consider. So this slide I think is really, really important. There are so many resources out there about how you can collaborate remotely. I know as a teacher, I've used many of these. So even my first LEGO League team, even before COVID, we had a Google Classroom set up where we would upload research documents, we would be sharing slides, we would be sharing pictures of code. Some teams are going to use Zoom. Especially in Zoom now, they have the option of having breakout rooms where you could have a project room and a robot room to talk about strategy, and then you could switch. FRC uses Discord a lot, and if you have older students in middle school, that might be a great option for you. I know as a coach, I like to make interactive slideshows that I was able to send to the students where they could click right on the link for building instructions or click right on the link for what we were talking about today. So Pear Deck is a good one. Google Slides is another good one. Flipgrid could be a great way to get the kids to talk about what they've been doing at home with the project or whatever. They can record what they're doing, upload it to Flipgrid, and then everybody in the group can check it out for ideas. You've got Teams Whiteboard and Google Drawing for collaborative brainstorming. Lots of different ways to create multimedia with Adobe Spark. Again, there's so many more things out there, and we're going to keep trying to keep an updated list as we get resources from coaches. You can take surveys. Even my first LEGO League team normally used Google Forms to take surveys. That's how we voted on our team name and did different things like that. Project management and organization. I know when I was at First Worlds, I met a team from Israel, and they were using Trello to kind of decide, okay, at this meeting, we're going to do this. At this meeting, we're going to work on the project. So depending on how in-depth your team is going to get, you will most likely be able to find a resource that works for you. But my biggest pro tip, my best practice for you is take a couple meetings in the beginning to figure out what works best for you. And that can be a really great core values tool. Maybe the team just gets together to play a Kahoot that they each made about each other, which is like this fun online game that they play at school a lot. Maybe you play meme generators, which the kids we know they love to be into memes, or they're into memes. Wow, I sound really old. But they're really into that kind of stuff. So take a couple meetings to figure out, can you share a document that way? Because then when I start showing you everything for core values and project and robot game, if you have your meeting structure set up and you know what you're going to use, everything will be a lot easier when you're trying to get some of these resources out to your team. So think about, again, try a couple meetings where maybe you're just experimenting and saying, oh no, we don't like that one, it didn't work very well, before you really put a lot of pressure on, okay guys, let's get to work. So with team meetings, I kind of wanted to, again, take a break before we got into core values and project and everything. Christian, are there any questions that you're seeing pop up that we might want to address?
I don't have any new ones at the moment, but I'll continue to keep an eye out on it.
Awesome. And again, the point of this, guys, is to think about where you are and what can you incorporate to still make this happen. So hopefully as we get into the next couple of slides, it really starts giving you things to bite onto. So let's talk about the challenge content that's already come up in some of the questions. I knew that first was going to be not sending 10 engineering notebooks this year. I will find out if it shouldn't be 2, but I will find out about that. But one thing that First has decided to do is give digital access to the team meeting guide, to all the guidebooks, the team meeting guide, the robot game rulebook. After you've gone through registration on your dashboard, you should be able to access this through ThinkScape. ThinkScape is a platform used more in FTC, but they've been able to utilize it in First LEGO League as well. Additionally, they don't have them posted yet, but they are making interactive PDFs of everything in the engineering notebooks. So if you're working in something like Zoom or Google Classroom, you can post a link to the interactive PDFs. You can have them working on documents at the same time. So those resources are coming out within the next few weeks from First, but they already have made the guidebooks digital. And again, we'll get back to that question of how many are they physically sending, because there is the possibility still to hand out the guidebooks to students and still use paper and pencil while you're meeting on Zoom. so I will check in on that. But one of the best practices, again, is figuring out what your meeting format is and what's going to be the best way to get this to your team. Maybe your team does want to use the actual books and then just meet through an online platform, but maybe they do want to use it virtually and be able to interact that way. It's going to be up to you. Because one thing to think about with the paper copy, if they're writing things in there, how are they going to share it with the group? So a digital option might be really helpful to teams who want to look at it that way. So on our on our website, I have spent a lot of time with Christian. We've been working on a lot of resources for you. You can find these resources by selecting First LEGO League Challenge and then going to our team resources. So we are really, really proud of some of the things we've collected here, and we hope that it's kind of your one-stop shop for what you need. So with core values is not something that, you're kind of always working on. The way I kind of explain core values is it's robot game and innovation project are what we do, but core values are how we do it. And especially in a time where kids are going to be going through a lot's going on in our world, I think that core values is still something that should remain at the front of your meetings. Focusing on core values, whether you're in person or remote, is going to help those kids feel confident and secure to get the learning done, to work as a team, to take those risks. So I really don't want core values to get lost when we talk about Project and Robot Game. If your team does plan to follow the engineering the engineering notebooks, the core values lessons are kind of embedded into each session. But I do want to make it clear right now, teams are not required to follow the structure of the engineering notebooks. There's a lot of great ideas in there, but some teams, they like to get outside of that. And I will show you other resources. Some teams, the lessons, the kids get ahead or aren't really feeling them. So there are other ways you can take it. But I just want to make it clear that if you attend an event, whether it be remote, whatever we're doing, you won't be marked down for not using an engineering notebook. We'll want to see your work, we'll want to see your process, but you don't have to use it. If you're going to use it, though, core values questions are already embedded in there, so hopefully use them as you go through. If your team is looking for other resources, we have a bunch of things on our website. This is not linked, this is just a screenshot of our website, but on our core values page, we have, these are slides that you can actually present to your teams through FLL tutorials. They've got an intro to core values. One of my favorite things is develop your team identity. That's one of the very first meetings you can have that the kids loved. When I was a coach in Stanton, Virginia, my team decided to be the Stanton Stormtroopers. And again, that guided a lot of our work. It guided a lot of our mottos and the little things we like to do, and it led to a lot of inside jokes. When you're trying to build that community within your team, a team identity is a really, really great way to do that. Maybe even have a logo drawing contest on Google Drawing. The kids will come up with some really cool things. We also have some guidelines on making decisions as a team. One thing I've seen teams do is have a decision process in place. You're going to disagree on things, so how can you kind of already have those decision processes in place for your team so you're not spend no time arguing about it. The next two slides were more for in-person events, the next two resources I mean. So we're not going to really touch on those now because the chances of us having an in-person event are still very much up in the air. And the way these looked in a remote event would be a little bit different. So we'll talk about these more when we have sessions on remote events in the future, but just know that they are there. One other great resource I would encourage you to check out is on our website right here. FLL Tutorials has already created a bunch of worksheets for teams on how to plan. The biggest thing you can do as a coach is empower your team to make the decisions. So if they're sitting there saying, okay, week 1, we want to do this. Week 2, we want to get this done. And they're making their own checklists. Yes, it will take you as the coach helping them get there. But if you're not trying to make everything now, FLL Tutorials has already gathered a lot of this for you. This is actually a link to a Google Docs workbook that you can copy. And then everything is, you're able to manipulate it. You're able to get right in there. If you're going to go through Google Drive with students, you're able to share it with them that way. So a lot of resources have already been made for you. One really cool resource that FIRST has put together is the Gracious Professionalism Check-In. This is a guide that gives you lots of spark ideas for questions. Maybe you start every meeting with a gracious professionalism question. It just could be a good way to get your kids tapped in. There are some core values activities. A lot of them might be meant more for in person, but there are still some things you can do online, like online breakout rooms and different things that they have linked here. So there are still ways that you can incorporate core values, whether you're meeting remote or whether you're meeting in person. One resource I'm really excited to announce this year that FIRST has not done is getting teams more in touch with mentors. So whether you're looking for mentors, experts in the field on your innovation project or your robot game, FIRST has now made a tool to help you match with them. So FIRST has created what they're calling the FIRST Mentor Network, and this is a platform where mentors and teams can go on to create profiles. So if you're a team, you could go on and create a profile about your team, and then a coach should do this, but they can say, we are looking for somebody who is an expert in EV3, or we are looking for an expert on our project, or we are looking for an expert in fitness. And then mentors who we are always, FIRST is always looking for, we're always kind of pushing them to register for. Mentors can register and say, these are the things I know how to do, and this is where I'm located at. And then this FIRST Network program is going to allow teams to help connect with those mentors virtually so they can set up a Zoom call or whatever platform you may be doing. This is going to be a great resource whether you're meeting in person or remote. We still want the kids connecting with real-world opportunities. We still want them being engaged and empowered through real knowledge that's out in the field. And so this FIRST Mentor Network is going to allow them to do that. This is something that we've been asking FIRST for a long time. And now they've finally got it up in time just for a very interesting season. So something definitely to look forward to. And again, when we send out the slides, the FIRST Mentor link will be, the FIRST Mentor Network link will be right here for you. So moving on to Innovation Project. If you're a new coach, I just want to unpack it really quick. If you're a veteran coach, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to do it in person, remotely, in this new day and age. So in the Innovation Project, teams will identify a problem to solve within the challenge. They'll design a solution that fits their community needs. They'll share their ideas, learn from others, and improve their solution, and then pitch their ideas. So the challenge this year, to kind of sum it up, all around us there's opportunities to play and be active, from open parks to cement courts in our classrooms, even when we're waiting in line. But more and more people are not active enough. Playing makes being active more fun. When you get creative when you want to play, and it's this creativity that can help us motivate to be more active. So that's what they're trying to do, identify a problem within that. I know for me as a coach, the project was always really overwhelming. They're essentially giving kids a problem that even adults haven't solved yet. So I wanted to give you some tips and tricks on how to even get your team started. So again, revisit the challenge story. There are some things in here that might spark some ideas for students. You also have Project Sparks in the engineering notebook. I believe this year they built in 4 Project Sparks. They are tied to the robot game, but these are supposed to be ideas that help the kids get started in identifying these problems. So that could be one way that you look at it. Maybe there's a problem in the Project Spark that your team really feels like fits their community and they want to move on from there. So think about how those project starts might be able to help you. On our resources, use our resources that we found on our website. Again, through FLL Tutorials, they've got already links to doing background research, identifying your problem. So they've already been a team for a long time. They've gotten expertise from other teams. So these are slides that you can actually present at your team meetings to show students to try to get them thinking about identifying that problem. And I think one of the really unique challenges we face is that during COVID-19, a lot of us are locked in the house right now, and we are looking for ways to make play more creative. We're looking for more ways to get out and be physical. There are only so many times you can take your dog on a walk during the day. There are only so many times you can do an online workout video if you can't go outside. So how can we get even more creative? I think that there are some really interesting opportunities. That's why checking in with your team and knowing your team is going to be really important. Maybe one of your team members has an elderly grandparent that's really struggling to get physical activity. Maybe there's some kind of situation happening at home with your team members that your team could really grasp onto. And in my experience, when teams and students can relate to the problems that they're solving, they're even more engaged in that problem-solving process. So when you're trying to get the kids started on getting that project together, there's a lot of different places that you can look for. In addition, again, FLO Tutorials has already made all of these innovation project worksheets that are in a Google Drive, that are in a Google format. You just go to this link, you copy it over. Again, you can find all of this on our website. So for the second part of the project, it's about sharing your ideas with experts and getting feedback from them. So again, you could use that First Mentor platform. They actually have a hashtag search engine, so you can hashtag a topic, and there's directions here, and it will allow you to help find the topic or subject that you're looking for, depending on what your students has identified as their problem. In addition, there are a lot of virtual experts out there. Again, this is on our website. NEPRIS is an organization, a website that literally just tries to connect industry experts to classrooms and homeschoolers and teams like First LEGO League team. So while they're not built for First LEGO League, their goal is the same in terms of getting kids connected with the experts. Skype also has a Skype with an expert session that you can look at, depending on what your topic is. There's all these other platforms for virtual field trips. Some of these we've actually geared towards the challenge, like NFL Play 60 is a nonprofit that gets kids playing outside. They've got some great ways to start. The Girl Scouts have a really great resource on becoming a citizen scientist. So again, things that you can look at to get the kids engaged. You can still have these experiences for them. It won't look the same, it won't feel the same, but we don't want to stop them from having these experiences. Whether you're in person or you're working remote, you definitely are going to want to check these out in terms of connecting with an expert. And then one thing I really encourage your team to do, and this is kind of another best practices pro tip for First LEGO League, stay in contact with that expert. Ask them if afterwards you are able to connect with them and share your idea. That's really going to show that you've really brought it back to the community. It's really going to refine your ideas as a team. So if you talk to an expert and got some ideas and then they came up with a project, ask that expert if it's okay to come back and say, okay, this is the feedback we took from you, and this is how we addressed it in our project. So another great resource, go back to those experts, develop a virtual relationship where you're able to kind of check back in when you're finding out new research. It's something that's really going to empower the kids as well when they realize they're communicating with a real expert in the field. So in terms of core values and project, Christian, I wanted to stop and see if we had any questions directed at core values or project.
You're so good.
Awesome. And again, I know a lot of this tonight is just throwing everything at you. Everything I have here is linked, and I'll be sending it out. So hopefully people are seeing some good ideas. If there's anything that you see that you're really liking, also feel free to throw it in the chat, or if you have other ideas. We want this to be, we want our website to be a living document of resources as we get into this season. So now I'm going to spend the last 15 minutes talking about kind of the big elephant in the room in terms of robot game. Sure, you can have nice Zoom sessions with core values and team building activities. And yes, you can make a project remotely, but a lot of teams really get into this because of the STEM experience, the math and science skills. And so how can we make that happen for them? I just want to remind you of our 3 conditions. Some of you guys are going to be able to meet safely with precautions put in place. Some of you guys will be meeting remotely, but somebody will still have access to a robot or table. Some of you guys will not have access to those things right in the beginning. So I want to make sure that when we're talking about robot game that we meet the needs of all of those categories. So I want to start with the bottom, that bottom bullet point, the teams that are meeting remotely and they cannot get to their robot right now. Maybe their robot is locked up inside their school, maybe their table, whatever it may be, they're not able to order their challenge kit yet, whatever it may be. I want to talk to those teams first. I know there are many school districts who have said we are going to go back in November, and that's not even totally for certain. Some people may go back before then. Again, we live in such a vast area that it will be different everywhere. So I would really encourage these teams to go ahead and start with remote with their project. A lot of teams always complain to me that, we got so into the robot game that we had to throw our project together at the end. Well, in COVID, we get to be innovative here, so maybe you flip it. Maybe you start with the project, and in the next couple slides, I am going to give you some ideas for how you can still keep kids engaged, because there may be some kids that say, I'm here for the robot, I'm here for the programming. So how can you still keep them engaged even if you need to start on robot game? Remember my quote from the beginning? It's about embracing that genius of and. We can do this and this and this, and not just the, well, we can do this or this, and that's it. So as we get into these slides, think about how we can still keep engaging our communities with that mentality of and. How can we make it work? So if you are a team that cannot meet remotely, or excuse me, that has to meet remotely and cannot meet in person, and you can't even get to your robot yet, okay, yes, go ahead and start on your project. You can still be meeting remotely and doing all that remotely. But I would encourage you, First has developed what they call First at Home, and it's linked here, but it's all of these are drop-down menus, which is tons of lessons and resources to coding websites, to computer-aided design things. Most of these things, I'd say 95% of these things are free. Some of them can be upgraded, but First is really trying to think about keeping that equity in mind. That's something that I know is really going to become important in this season, is how are we still helping some of those students who may not have access to those resources? Again, it goes back to the conversation we had at the beginning. What does your team need? What resources can we get them to make sure that these kids can still be successful even in the situation we're in? So First has already done the work in terms of creating the resources for you. Whether you're a teacher or a parent, there's a lot of great resources within this website, and they're going to be updated all throughout the season. And I know this because every week I've checked back over the summer. Every week I've seen new lessons, new resources getting added, and they're just going to continue to do that throughout the season. So that still can be frustrating, just to do other things for a team that may not be able to meet. Now, this slide is going to be for teams who have to meet remotely or might have partial access. So if you cannot get to your robot or you have partial access, the kids can still start doing research. I know I have watched 4th through 8th graders watch YouTube videos of other kids playing games. They're not even playing the game, they're watching videos of other kids playing the game. Kids these days will do that. They will go ahead and do research on things that they might not have right in front of them because they have the internet to be able to watch the videos and learn more about it. So again, on our website, we have linked to Lego Mindstorm tutorials as well as Spike Prime tutorials. We do anticipate that more Spike Prime tutorials will become available as the product is out there more, but we've got some really great things for you to look at here. Kids can still be coding through Scratch. Kids can still be working on some of these things, looking at robot designs. FLL Tutorials is great and has uploaded all of these great robot designs that teams can start to look at. So again, even if they can't be there and in the room, they can still be partaking in the learning. If someone has access to the robot game, they can still be zooming in and saying, oh no, I saw this great tutorial about this. The learning can still happen even if they're not in the room together. This is a resource I love, that FLL Tutorials. They actually put this out every year, but I think it's even more important. Robot game can still happen in some ways for teams with no access or partial access. All the mission videos are online on YouTube right now. So teams can still engage in mission planning. They can still talk about, well, what kind of things would you need to do to make that mission happen? This is actually linked on our website right here, the Sketch Planner. What this does is it allows teams, it's not a collaborative thing where everyone can interact at the same time, but it allows students individually to pick a color, which we know they love to do, and they can draw out a path and they can say, okay, if this is the challenge we're going for, we can do it this or this way. And then after you do this, at the bottom, there's a way to save these, and maybe you upload it to whatever platform you're using or whatever management style you're using for your team. But on our website, we have the challenge mat link, so a really big, beautiful, blown up version of the challenge mat. We've got the sketch planner there. We've even got an unofficial game score. So teams who might not have access to the robot, students, they could get in there and try to figure out, okay, what missions are going to get us the most points by looking at the game score. There are still ways that these students can engage even when they can't be in the room. And again, FLL Tutorials has got all these robot design engineering worksheets. There's also going to be a lot of tips within the engineering notebooks, attachments, worksheets. So even if they can't be there, again, the whole point of this is how can we get them still excited, still learning, still being a part of the team. And again, I want to say thank you to FLL Tutorials because they prepared a lot of this stuff. So I do want to talk about teams that will have partial access. This is a little bit of a scary one for some teams, but the building the mission models. I know that was one of the most exciting things for my teams to do, is to get in there and get their hands on the Legos and build something. But as a coach, this is also terrifying because you literally get access to thousands of pieces that are strategically bagged up. So if you're a new coach, you basically get the missions all bagged up in numbered sets. There's 9 sets of bags. Some of these sets have more than one bag to them. You will also receive a bag that has some extra parts. If you look at the online directions that come with the kit, they tell you in the beginning what parts you need for that bag. So if you assign a kid bag 1 and you pull out the parts they're going to need from here, you could potentially send it home with them and give them directions. You could even have a Zoom building party where they're all building together and doing special things, or it's not special things, but doing the things that they need with it, asking for help, showing their teammates what the parts are. Then you could collect the models and assemble the game in one central location. Again, not every student may not be able to get to that location, but if they're doing their own research and they've already got their hands on the models, that could be a cool thing. One thing to note about this game, you will get just 3 regular tires. You'll see they come in the game, but that'll be something that's not bagged up. And then you'll get the dual lock pieces, which the coach should probably hang on to. And again, some of these mission models are tied to the project sparks that I talked about in the engineering notebook. So potentially, you could even have the student remotely do some of the research on the model that they are doing their project spark on. What they really try to do this year is match the project to the robot game. So you'll see some things kind of come into play. And when you get your kit, again, by moving our competition season back, it gives coaches a little bit more time to figure out how they're going to navigate some of these interesting challenges. I know as a coach, this one scared me, but at the end of the day, I would do this for my students because I would want them to get their hands on the Legos, and I know that's one of the really exciting parts for them. We will talk about sanitation tips later, so if you're worried about that, I promise I'll give you some sanitation tips in the next few slides. So maybe you could look at programming remotely, meaning that a lot of the EV3 and Spike Primes, or excuse me, all of them, they're meant to run off one computer, but there are still some ways in which you could have one person running the robot, but more than one person working on the programming. So there are lots of ways to do this. The easiest way that we have found is through Chrome Remote Desktop. So by watching this YouTube video, you could have one student in one house with the robot, tapped in remotely to another student's desktop, where they could be doing some of the programming. And on this slide, or I guess I'll show you in a second, but on this slide, you can see that what this team did. This is the FLL Tutorials team. They, in their Zoom call, they actually put these different things into a Zoom call. I know some coaches, this may be way overwhelming. Then don't go there. If you want to go there, though, please go ahead. I mean, I know I've seen people try some interesting things on Zoom calls. This is just one idea. But again, this is some ways that you could still facilitate and get some team members involved, even if you can't meet in person all the time. There are still some great tips out there. Again, FLL Tutorials has a bunch of other tips. These tips are included right here on this link. They've done this. They're that share and learn group on Facebook. They're a great resource if you really want to get into it, where they had a camera on the field. They had teams looking at different things. So again, just something to think about if you're willing to go that route. Just a few more slides and then we'll take questions and wrap up for the night. A couple of really important announcements. If you are able to meet with partial access as a remote team or in person, acquiring additional materials could be really helpful. Whether you're in person or whether you're trying to do remote setups, first is doing something that they've never done before, and they are allowing teams to order additional materials. At the end of August, teams will be able to order one extra challenge kit if they have the funds. Again, I know that's not going to be a possibility for everybody. Check with our team grants, check with some of your organizations to see if you might be able to do that. I just want to give as many ideas as possible. Also, first is looking at the ability for teams to just purchase the mat. This could be a more cost-effective idea for teams. The Legos are what cost the money in the challenge kit. The mat, not so much. but having the mat might be able to help teams work on line following code, which we will maybe help try to get into more on another session. It will help teams be able to just navigate the field, even if they don't have the Lego pieces there. One idea for teams that don't have a lot of access to monetary resources, I know right now that there are robots locked up in schools. The school that I worked at had classes that used EV3s, and we just had our own robot for First Lego League. But in an all virtual setting, those robots are just going to sit in classrooms. So talk with schools, talk with organizations, after school clubs that might have robots. They might be willing to lend robots out to the team in order for them to at least build and code and learn as they go through. So again, asking what's available in your resource is going to be really, really helpful. If you're able to meet in person, Lego Education has put together a hygiene guide on some of the best practices for being able to clean Legos and take care of that. If you're in a classroom, they also, like I said, have that special website on managing those resources. Sorry, I needed some water. Think about how you store materials. Maybe there are only certain materials that certain kids use as you're trying to keep those student cohorts and trying to keep kids apart. Maybe you're looking at the use of masks or looking at the use of keeping distancing rules between teams so you're able to separate materials that way. Again, a lot of these things will be posted on our website. So again, Christian, I wanted to stop and see if we have any questions. Again, I know these are a lot of resources. At this point, it's really about taking it back to your team to see what can we do for this season. So any questions, Christian?
We have a core group tonight, so no more questions as of right now.
Okay, well, I'm hoping that this webinar was, again, more of just ideas for teams to get started, and maybe once they get into some of these resources, they have more questions.
Yeah.
So with that being said, we will take a part of our season updates webinar to specifically address these resources. So over the next 2 weeks, if your teams start to get into some of these links in different places, please feel free to submit your questions, send your questions to us through that Register Here webinar, and we'll be sure to address them. You can also send them to questions@va-dcfll.org. If you're ready to get started on registration, our last webinar was about that, so you can also find it there. And again, we'll definitely send out this recording and the PDF with all the links to it. But we really hope that this just gave you something to chew on, something to think about. Because again, I want to go back to that quote. It's really going to be about the genius of the and not the tyranny of the or. We can still provide these experiences to our kids and have a great season. It might look differently, it might feel differently, but we're an innovative community and I know we can make this happen. So we really hope that you join us for our next session on August 25th. We're going to be trying to go over more updates on the schedule, what things might look like, and address this. I did just see a question come up about where we're going to post the slides. So a couple places. We are going to post these slides. We're going to send them out tomorrow on the listserv. We're going to post them on our YouTube channel with the video. It'll be in the comments section. And then on the team resource page, we're also going to be putting that on our website. We'll kind of have a link to the video, link to the slides. So you can find them in a couple of places. And I actually already have some coaches coming in. If you are a team in the Fairfax area, we do have a former coach who might be looking to loan out an EV3 robot. So that also I love. Jeff, thank you for mentioning that because that might be a resource that we try to put together in terms of loaning out equipment. I don't know how much we can do regionally, but I think it's getting just different suggestions, offers, things like that that are really going to help out. And we've even got some support to be a mentor. So please send me specific emails. But Jeff, I'll touch base with you as well in terms of helping this community get through these tough times. We're going to make it work, and we're going to get these things to our kids. So I'm going to go ahead and end the session for tonight. It's 8:01. I really appreciate everyone being here. And again, you'll be able to find all of these resources in all the places I mentioned. And Jeff posts his information. So in the chat session, if you're looking for a mentor in the Fairfax area or maybe a loaner robot, boom, we've already got a connection right there. Thank you so much, Jeff. So thank you, Virginia, DC. I really appreciate your willingness to jump into this season. And we will see you next time. Have a great evening, everybody.